Welcome to another episode of the Agronomy Highlights podcast. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Spellman, and I'm joined here with my wonderful co host and colleague, Justin Brackenrich. Justin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Ryan. How about yourself?
Justin, I am living the dream. It's a little dreary outside, but I'm not going to let that dull our sparkle today. We have maybe some anger inducing or very passionate topic here today for our
Yeah,
farmers. What's
they
that?
tell us we need more character, right? And more, we need more thought-provoking conversations instead of just other stuff. So we went out and we found it, and I think this is something that passion is what drives this, right? This is something that our farmers are very passionate about, our neighbors, our friends, and I think it affects us all, including my wife when it happens to her rose bushes in the front yard, right? But today we're looking to talk about deer and deer damage in Pennsylvania. And this is a topic that's come up all through my career, but I would say the last 2 to 3 years, it has kind of been one to two of the most important topics that we've kind of seen, or as farmers have mentioned this. And today we've got a great resource. I'll kind of give you a little bit of backstory that I went to a meeting in Washington County, kind of put on by the farm bureaus, and we got to listen to a lot of people that have had experience, positive and negative, with deer and damage and crops in their homes. And there was a gentleman that came in. I guess I'm foreshadowing. I don't know. Maybe we're trying to build some suspense, but he was with the game commission, and he came up and he talked about all this stuff. And I thought what he said was very important, and it resonated very well with me. And I think that it's something that would resonate well with a lot of the people in the state. It's just getting the opportunity to hear it. So I'm looking forward to filming this one and doing it so more people can understand what we're up against and what we're doing to fix this problem.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, as you've mentioned, going to a meeting and hearing about deer damage, which is that our topic really today is that. Um, it's funny, we do all these pesticide meetings where we're talking about weeds, insect pests, disease damage, and you talk to the crowd. Maybe it's about slugs, and you kind of hear crickets, right? And then you ask them, what's your biggest pest challenge? What's your biggest disease challenge? And I'd say the most common answer is deer, right? If you can do something to help me with my deer damage, then that's my biggest problem. And I hear it time and time again. And I think we really have a lack of options, right? There's these products that you might be able to spray right on your borders. Most of those products wash off with a rain. It's not really feasible for us to put up deer fencing when you're working with a sizable amount of acreage. And so it really comes down to some of these options, these I guess you would call them lethal options that we can talk about with our guest here today.
So let's introduce him. So we have Lieutenant in charge of law enforcement in the Southwest region, Officer Brian Singer. Brian, do you want to introduce yourself and give a little bit of what your job is and what you do and who you work for?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, guys. Happy to be here. Appreciate you inviting me on. And Justin, when we met at that meeting, we talked about doing this briefly here a couple months ago. Actually, that was probably back in like September. So we're finally here. Finally get to do it, and I'm excited. So yeah, as you mentioned, I'm the lieutenant in charge of the law enforcement program here in the Southwest Regional Office for the Pennsylvania Game Commission. I've been in this capacity for about 10 years, with the agency for around 15 years. So one of those, one of the facets of my job is dealing with the permitting and stuff that goes along with some of what we'll get to here, I'm sure, today.
So can you tell us what your background was or the appeal or what kind of drew you to this career within the Game Commission?
Yeah, sure. So growing up, I grew up in a hunting family, predominantly, rifle hunters, but I had this nostalgia that, I wanted to work with wildlife one day. I was an avid hunter growing up in my early teens, and I went to school for environmental science, kind of majoring in biology side of things, because I thought that's really kind of where I needed to be. And I was fortunate enough to get to apply for the cadet class back in 2000. I mean, it might have been eight. I think 2008 I applied. Went into the class, was accepted in 2010, graduated in 2011. before I was assigned to a field district. So it's kind of always been there for me. I'll be honest, I didn't really understand what the career would be like. I didn't understand what the job was, but I always just I put the agency and the staff and the wardens, kind of on this pedestal, and I just wanted to be a part of it.
I think that's one of the things that we hear a lot is people saying these. I didn't know exactly what I was getting into when I got into my job, but I found out once I got here, I really liked it and it fit for me. And I've been doing it for 15 to 30 years, and every day it's fun and it's new, and I enjoy the work that I do. And I think that's what makes people willing to do new things and have the passion and stuff in it is because they just sometimes you just like what you do, and sometimes that comes from that just kind of learning as you go. What we want to start with today is what is your interaction? Before we started the podcast, we were all kind of sitting around chatting and talking about this, and you mentioned that one of your favorite parts of this is interacting with the farmers and going to some of these outreach meetings and doing that. Can you talk a little bit more about what your interaction with the Farm Bureau or county farmers, or what that looks like, and what you're kind of doing when you do those interactions?
Yeah, sure. Early on in my career as a district warden, just trying to learn the area and meet the neighbors, and sometimes dealing with different issues or complaints. I would just stop in and talk to farmers. Try not to bother them when they're out on the tractor, but I've had farmers, shut it down when they see me coming and stand there for an hour and a half and talk. And we're the same type of person, hardworking, passionate about what we're doing. So we really enjoyed that. And to me, it was one of the highlights of my field career, with working with some of these farmers that are still good friends to this day. So in the field capacity, it was talking to individual farmers. Since coming here into this position, it was kind of more at a 100-mile view. I would deal with problems that may come in, or farmers having issues or problems or complaints. Here recently, kind of, as little as a year or two ago, we've been invited to different Farm Bureau meetings, one in Cambria County, one near Johnstown, the one we met at Armstrong County. We got more coming up here. So my role has become more of a speaker to the group, from a agency and regional standpoint. And I really enjoy doing them, quite frankly. We're solving problems. The conversations are not always, smiling. We get some people that are passionate and upset, like you guys mentioned earlier. But really, that one-on-one communication, I think, is where all of this starts from. We need to have it. The Farm Bureau has certainly, in the last couple of years here, grown in its relationship with the agency. We're really trying to work together more often than not. And it seems to really be coming around, and podcasts just like yours are one of the things that we can use, to communicate with your listeners and the farmers in the community.
Yeah, certainly. I think a lot of times when we talk about this topic, there's a little bit of tension, right, between sometimes the farmers and what they expect the game commission to really be about. And far and away, oftentimes when I see you guys at some of our programs, whether they're with the Farm Bureau or with us, um, it ends up being a useful conversation. I think we realize there's more overlap than we think, and you guys oftentimes are out there looking for ways to help the farmers and do it in a way that makes sense, and can make everyone happy. And I think it usually ends up a lot better than what our farmers are expecting, and it's a great open door. So it's great to see you guys out at some of these programs, and I think it's awesome to see you all being proactive about engaging with the farming community. So Justin, I don't know if you want to move. I saw some chats. Are you just asking if?
So yeah, and we can cut all this out, but I guess where I was leading with that, Brian, is maybe a conversation of do we encourage farmers to kind of proactively reach out to the game commission and have a relationship with you all? As does that help make this conversation better? Right? If we're looking to know the game commission, I think about it from the angle that we work at with Pennsylvania Department of Ag, where we have these regulatory people. If you know someone that's regulatory before they come on your farm in what we would consider like an incident, or in that negative connotation we would put it in, sometimes that can help cut the tension, right? I'm not saying it makes it easier for you, or that you can expect them to be more lenient. But I think there is often something that maybe that authoritativeness or something is out rather than just seeing one of you all roll down the lane for the first time with never making contact. So, do you encourage farmers to, if they see you, to come up to say, "Hey, my name's Justin. I've got a farm out at this place. Nice to meet you. If you're ever in the area, stop by. I'd like to show you around the place or show you my deer damage."
Absolutely. And that is so important. And unfortunately, it doesn't happen enough because farmers are busy, game wardens are busy. But just merely setting up a meeting, say, hey, meet me out at the farm on Tuesday at 1, and I want to take you for a ride and show you my place. Um, we certainly support our wardens doing that. We would hope that the farming community would consider doing that as well, because as you mentioned, that starts that relationship, that starts the communication process. And when two sides on an issue can clearly communicate, you just you avoid a lot of stress, you avoid a lot of tension, and you avoid a lot of the issues, and it allows you to kind of move forward in a productive manner. We want the farmer to be 100% confident and clear in what they're doing. And it also, and I tell a lot of my farmers this, by communicating with us often, following the rules that are on the books, they're not necessarily the warden's rules, they're laws. You help us protect you as well, because we mentioned, we were chatting before. The agency has a mandate, legislative mandate, to manage wildlife for everyone. And sometimes there's people on different sides of that issue, people that want wildlife present, people that don't. And we're really sometimes in a tough spot. So we try to bring stakeholders to the table to have these conversations, so that everybody's clear, everybody's understanding of the other person's side of it. And really, we find that that's the best way to move forward, where everybody can kind of live with it and not build up that frustration or that tension.
That's great, and maybe a good takeaway from that for our farmers is build a relationship with your game commission that allows them to be your friend and not your enemy. I think we could deduce it like that, and express your concerns, and that's one way we can vouch for our community, because you do also serve the farming community as well as other citizens. So I think it's good to understand that balance from some of our discussion before the episode and now as well. So I think I want to move on to this deer damage piece. Maybe from your perspective, I mean, we kind of mentioned how much we're seeing this as we go to meetings, and how big of a concern is it? Maybe from your perspective, how big of a problem is deer damage to crops in your region, and have you noticed this increase over time, or has it always been such a big problem?
Yeah, in my career, it's always been present. I'll answer your second question kind of first here, but it's always been present, and it's always been, we'll call it an issue. That ebbs and flows. Certain areas, as deer densities rise and fall, or farming practices are changed, or different crops are in the ground. Certainly, it can almost change from year to year. But in a general context, agricultural damage, especially in this region and some of the larger farming communities, is always present. It's always imminent, as we say. So, to answer your question there, yes, it's prevalent. Now, has it been over time? That certainly changes a lot as well. You sit in one of these Farm Bureau meetings with just one county present, and one farmer will tell you he doesn't see a whole lot of it, and the guy sitting next to him at the table that has a farm maybe 10 miles away is just absolutely suffering from it horribly. So it's there's no one size fits all here, answer to the problems. And I think when we get into the different programs available to these folks, we can certainly help your listeners understand how, even if you aren't suffering bad, or you are suffering bad, there's options for everybody.
And I think that for me, and potentially you, I hear so much anecdotal information about this. You talk about localized between this person and that person, and I'll kind of drift a little bit. Where I'm at, I'm right outside of Uniontown, and so you've got like the flatlands, and then 15 minutes you're up on top of the mountain, and life's different, right? And we kind of have these like conversations that say, well, there's not a lot of beans and corn up here on the mountain, so the deer don't know what that stuff tastes like. So we're not damaged as badly. I'm not saying there's not damage, because there certainly is, but it seems to be the more vast these areas of cropping become, you see this population kind of explode because you have this bigger food source. They develop this kind of affinity to like, well, we know what we want to eat. We've got it all the time during the summer. Let's keep doing it. When you go back up on the mountains, you see these like smaller pockets of this stuff, right? And they're foraging more, and they seem to be more like quote unquote deer, and it becomes less of a problem. So I do hear the same thing that you're saying is, well, they don't even get in our gardens because they've never tasted corn before up here. And then you come off the mountain and they're like, well, that's all they've ever tasted. They won't even eat grass. We watch them walk across grass to get from corn to corn. So
Yeah.
it is, they are interesting, and people observe them quite well and know quite a lot about what they do localized within their own fields and pastures and regions.
Yeah, and that's what makes it hard about trying to manage, manage the species, but manage the issue on a statewide basis, because there's just so much variation, as you mentioned there, in damage that's being seen.
So what about populations, right? And I'll go back to these things that I'm sure you've heard before too, that uh, they'll say, well, when I was young, if you saw a deer track, you went back and rounded up all your neighbors and you drug them all out in the woods just so you could see the track, let alone the deer, because there weren't that many. And if you fast forward, I don't know, maybe that was 50 or 60 years ago and into now, it's kind of exploded. Do you have any thoughts on like where that comes from? Like why are we seeing such a high level now compared to what we used to, and is this trend going to continue?
It's hard to say. Certainly, I'm not a biologist, so I don't necessarily am able to speak to the biological components of it. But I see it change. Let's use bears for instance. In certain parts of the county, we had bears when I started 15 years ago. Harvest rates were 80, 90, 100, where now we don't see any. So these populations kind of adapt to different habitats, and they move and they change. I don't know how many deer we had in the 60s, compared to what we do now. All I know is in certain areas, your farmers will tell you, our wardens would tell you, your homeowners that are getting their rose bushes eaten will tell you we have too many deer. And then you can go to other parts of the state where, they may go weeks and not see one. So, uh, I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer to your question if we have more or not. I certainly know that we have higher populations in certain areas. Urban sprawl, I think, has some effects on some of these things as we start to move housing and development into areas that were traditionally, habitat before. Problems arise, and really that's where there's humans and there's wildlife and there's conflict. That's where the game commission is involved. So I don't know totally the answer to your question, to be honest with you.
So I make a joke that I tell my people it depends, right? And I can tell them I get a bonus every time I say it depends. I don't get a bonus, but it's the running joke that I have, and every time I'll say it at these meetings to the ones I see a lot, they'll stick their hand up and rub their finger together like I'm getting. But it is right. It depends. It's biology, it's animals, it's wildlife, it's all of the things, and as you outlined, it's really hard to kind of put your finger on all of these things and give an answer. But I appreciate your honesty in what you're saying could or could not be the cause to some of this.
Yeah, of course.
So I want to jump into the management programs now, right? And I think we're going to pause as we kind of go through this and say, as a listener, I want you to think in your head how many programs. This was one of the most impactful things that you did the day that I was at that meeting. Is how many programs do you think that are there, and how many deer can you harvest, and how many days can you do it? But how many programs do you think are available in the state of Pennsylvania for someone that is meeting all the criteria as a farmer, as eligibility meets? What would that number look like to someone at home listening to this podcast? And so then I'm going to let Brian answer this and step through what all of these are. And so think about a second. Okay. So Brian, what's the answer to this question?
Yeah, so the answer is five. Essentially, we've categorized simply, five program areas that allow a person, as you stated, that meets the legal criteria, to be able to mitigate, wildlife damage on their property or their leases. And essentially that can be done 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So there's essentially in one variation of program or another, no limit. And I think that's kind of shocking to a lot of people when they hear that. But if you look back at to why that's happening, the agency, and I hear this question all the time, what's the Game Commission doing to help us with this problem? And essentially, the Game Commission is helping to manage and adapt and change and correct these programs to make it as least intrusive as possible on a landowner farmer, to be able to alleviate the problem. Keeping in mind, we still have to manage this resource for the other Commonwealth citizens that don't necessarily see the same thing happening. So 5 programs.
So let's start with number one.
Okay.
Where would that be? And let's take the name of it. Let's talk about the program, what it is, and what it requires to be eligible for that program.
Yeah, and this one I think a lot of people don't think about as as even something that helps them, because it's tradition. But I start off those meetings with I ask the group, who in here is a hunter, and you guys would know, most if not all of the folks in the room are what they would consider themselves as a hunter, somebody who hunts deer. And what a unique position to be in, where as a hunter you want to harvest deer. That's the goal when you go out, but as a farmer you don't want to see any. So the first one that we kind of categorize is seasonal recreational hunting. As we know it, those seasons have expanded, opportunity has increased. Special regulations areas like Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and around the cities, those seasons are September to late January. So I think the first one that's overlooked is harvesting deer on your targeted areas, where you're suffering loss during a recreational open hunting season.
Yeah, I think one interesting piece of that regular hunting season, I think if you would challenge some folks to think about how many doe tags did you apply for and get, and then how many did you actually use at the end of the season, right? Some people fill all their tags, but some people don't, right? So sometimes folks aren't necessarily taking full advantage of that one management tactic, right?
Yeah, correct. Because we think of traditional hunting as, tradition, enjoyment, spending time with family, um, you know, opportunity for the kids or grandpap, or we don't think about it as let's get out there and harvest some of these mouse that are eating our fields. So, but it can be very effective, and it's very long season. Potentially between early season, archery season, the muzzleloader, rifle junior senior overlaps right through their traditional rifle season, including, flintlock and late archery. Talk about, a lot of opportunity to get out there and have chances to fill some of those tags.
So devil's advocate on this, farmer's perspective, if you put out more tags, if you allow more harvest, are we at capacity? Why not allow more people to kill more deer?
Um, and I think as we go through the program, I think we'll explain to people how they are. Essentially, there's not a lot of limit, and I don't know how long you guys have been hunting for, but when I started, you got one doe tag. Now I think it's up to 6. Traditional doe tags within limit, but now you also have these other programs, which I think we're going to hit here, that essentially somebody could have dozens and dozens of tags in their pocket, and part of that is trying to get these to the folks who don't just buy them and sit on them, as Ryan mentioned there, but actually use them. Farmers will tell you we need people out here pulling the trigger, and that's really what some of these programs are designed to do.
And I'll be honest, full disclosure, I am a sitter and a watcher. I do like to be out. I like to hunt, but I enjoy that as much of that maybe heritage thought of unplugging for a while and sitting in the woods and watching the birds or watching things as much as I do. The story says all the work starts when you pull the trigger, right? I don't like to work that hard. And so I can openly admit, and I tell all my producers, I am not the answer to your problem either, right? That's not my game. I could be happy to see a bunch of them go away, but I am not the guy to go out there and do that. And so that's where uh, we really need other people kind of stepping into this role and getting other people involved in some youth sports or youth hunts and things like that to come back and help with this. So anyway, I digress.
Yep.
What's number two?
Yeah, so number two, kind of your statement there kind of leads us into number two when we're talking about tags and allowing people to shoot more deer. We call it the Deer Management Assistance Program, or DMAP for short. And basically it's a voluntary program that a landowner can enroll for up to one coupon, which can be redeemed for a license or a tag per 5 acres. So that includes other things outside of just agriculture. So if they have woods on their property, that part of those acreages still apply. Um, it's a management tool. So you don't necessarily even have to be a farmer to enroll in DMAP. I personally have my property enrolled. It's all wooded. I have no agricultural ground, and I do that to make sure I'm managing in a proper way for regeneration, etc. And this allows you to basically allocate doe tags to your farm, to your property, not management wide, 2C, 2D, whatever. These are only for a delineated space. And part of that is putting a management plan in place that's as simple as you're suffering browse issues or crop issues. And it's quite easy. And then you can hand out the coupons to who you want, who you trust, who will actually come and use them. Again, to Ryan's point, not sit on them. I'm going to use these coupons, and it just helps us focus the harvest on a smaller scale than our normal recreational seasons, management unit wide. So that would be number two.
So can I ask a little about this management system you're talking about? How does that get, does someone from your office come out and do that? Do we have to do something? What does that process look like?
Very simple. You can type up a management plan of really what's wrong, what's happening, what you're trying to accomplish on your property, and you can even hand draw a map. We don't require you to have a GIS tax map. It can be very rudimentary. It just outlines what your goals are, what you're trying to accomplish, and what's going on. Overpopulation. You have neighbors that don't harvest enough antlerless deer, and so you submit that to us. Our biologist looks at it. She puts it in the computer system. You used to have to apply every year, sending in new stuff. We've come a long way with allowing it to necessarily be kind of renewal system style. So it's a little less burdensome on the applicant. And then
So
they just mail them the coupons once it's approved.
so just to kind of dig into this a little bit more, so you mentioned that these spaces are kind of 5 acres per one coupon, right? So does that mean if I'm a land manager, like theoretically, I could, if I have 100 acres, I could have 20 coupons?
So for the the DMAP program, I probably misspoke because I'm mixing the two of them. The DMAP program, it's one for 50, but if you do the management plan, you can request more. We will get into the 1 per 5. That is under the other program, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So my apologies, it's 1 per 50. So if you had 100 acres, you could get two. If you did a management plan, you can go higher than that. So you can request 10 or 12 or 15, and the biologist looks at it and says, yeah, I can see why you're having this problem. Here's your map, here's your property boundaries. I can look around and say, yep, there's not a lot of other issues around you, or there's a lot of issues around you. This is a central hub. So you can get approval outside of the noted 1 per 50 acres.
And I'm cognitive of this, and I don't want to put all the onus on the producer and the farmer. So, but this sounds like one of those things that if you have damage and you're submitting this plan, the more succinct and thorough you can be outlining this plan and outlining the reasons for this, the more likely it is that your request is going to be satisfied for additional tags. Is that correct? If you write it up, and I'm not being, if you write it up on a napkin and send it in and say, hey, I need 50 tags to the acre, right? Like, you're not going to get that. But if you have a very clear, succinct, here's photos of damage, here's what's going on. If you put some thought and effort to this, it is more likely you're going to get traction and get some of this accomplished.
Absolutely. And if it's not something, that the landowner is really comfortable with or familiar with, and maybe they know they're having problems, but they don't know how to draft it up. There's so many different resources out there. You guys would be one of them to say, hey, this is kind of what you want to lean on. Show them that you're having browse issues in the forest, or, you're having obviously agricultural damage that's happening. Certainly the better it looks, the more we can defend the decision to approve something like that.
Now, I have one last question before we move on to our third program, and maybe this will preface the rest of the programs as well. So, we're talking about if you have a coupon, you can manage these deer, right? And you might have a certain amount of tags with that coupon. Now, is this any time of the season? And any time of the season, is it also can I keep every deer that I kill, or is there something that a transaction that has to happen with the commission?
Yep, no. So not to mix the programs, but you're absolutely right. You can use that tag during any open season. So you have a recreational season, you have your unit-wide tags. The Deer Management Assistance Program DMAP tags are property specific, but you can still use them anytime throughout the season, and you can keep that animal as the hunter. You don't have to turn that in. That comes in a different program here, which we'll get to on number 4. So if you want to jump in, we can go right to 3 too, so we're not kind of getting too far apart on them. Number 3 would be what we now call the Agricultural Deer Management Assistance Program, or AgTag. It is now very similar to the DMAP program, but the season dates are extended. So it's changed here. If your farmers or your listeners are a little more old school, they might remember green tag or red tag. That's what it was called before, because we actually handed out snap tags. Now it's the same process as DMAP, where you can get 1 per 5 acres, as I mentioned earlier, incorrectly under the DMAP program. Under ag tag, you can get 1 per 5 cultivated acres. You get those coupons. You can hand them out up to 4 per person currently. There's a couple of things in play here that might change that in the future to expand opportunity, but you can give up to 4 coupons per hunter. And as long as they're licensed, they can come and harvest those deer on your property. Same thing, they can keep them, they can donate them. It kind of takes some of the work off of the farmer and puts it on to a hunter who wants to come and help. But the main difference between this program is currently you can use these ag tags outside of the traditional hunting seasons. So the traditional hunting seasons is where you can use the DMAP. The ag program is outside of that. So you have a February to April season, then it closes for fawning season, and then comes in essentially to the end of August, right before traditional seasons start up again. So it's expanding that time of the year outside of your normal hunting seasons when farmers are planning. They're starting to see some imminent threats of damage or even damage later in the season, and it allows them to use these red tags or these ag tags as additional harvest coupons for that particular property. So to build on this, you have your seasonal recreational hunting, you have your DMAP, which is extra tags for in season. Now you have ag tags for your property that allow people to hunt outside of normal seasons. Am I kind of making that
Yeah,
understandable?
this is great. I have 2 follow-up questions. So the first one I have, and I know you get this question because I've heard you get it. February to April and August to September, I understand why you're saying this because this is fawning season, but we're taking out the cropping season from that hunting zone. And I'm sure our coverage is other places. But if February to April, we don't have things in the field. And what we do have is most susceptible between April and August, right? And now we get into August, September, they're just hiding in the corn or something. We can't see it.
Yeah.
Can we cover those things with other stuff?
Yeah, I personally believe that kind of falls under what we mentioned earlier, where we're required to manage the species properly for all Pennsylvanians, and a concession to remove it during fawning season. I think most farmers, although they might be tough and gruff, they're somewhat empathetic too, and they don't necessarily want to be orphaning fawns or shooting the doe as she's about to drop the fawn. So taking out that small window, although it's not necessarily ideal for the purpose of trying to mitigate crop damage, It's a concession that helps us kind of justify these programs to to either, the other non-consumptive users of wildlife, who may look at this and say, well, that's just wrong, or it's a problem. It's kind of a concession that we agreed to, that was, hey, let's stop it for this short period of time, so that we're not causing more inhumane issues, and we'll move on from there. So it's a tough one, but it's true. And the same thing goes. I literally had a farmer stop me yesterday and ask about crows. He's having some crow issues. As you guys know, when the corn hits the ground, those buggers can go right down the row and just clean them up. Um, the breeding season for crows happens right when corn's getting planted. So we have a closed season for crows, for the same reasons, during, unfortunately, one of the tougher times of the year. So not to say those decisions can't change in the future when you're talking about wildlife management, but the powers to be at one point got together and decided that if we're going to open this up, all year for people to come in and hunt, we should probably not be doing it when the fawns are hitting the ground. So,
And I think you made a point there that maybe we haven't mentioned, or maybe people listening to this. All of these programs that we have and will talk about require this animal to be legally gutted or eviscerated, whatever term you want to use, and either harvested or used somewhere, right? Like these are not programs we just shoot them and leave them lay or throw them over the hill, right? And so I think there is something to be thought about what you mentioned of a late gestation deer, doe, as we're out here trying to make these harvests and going in there and dealing with that. So that can also be problematic, or something we may not be expecting as we, yeah, gut these and eviscerate them out in the middle of a field. That can be a tough spot.
correct. Well said. Yep.
So the other question I did have is, with this deer tag, the ag deer management program, or the others, is the landowner in control of selecting who gets these tags?
Yes, and we think that that is one of the most important tools, and here's why. The old program, the farmer had to allocate snap tags. They were very much involved with handing out tags, collecting tags, keeping track of who was hunting, who was not. We don't want them to not do that, but one of the complaints that we heard at the time was it's just a lot to try to manage the old red tag program. So by doing it from a standpoint, and then they had to report too at the end of the year. So by doing it from a standpoint where they can give out a coupon to a trusted hunter, um, that puts some of the onus on the hunter then, right? So they go and redeem that coupon for a license. They're required to report on that license, whether they harvest or not. So it took some of the work off of the farmer to go back about their business, and put some of the onus on the person who captured who purchased the license from the coupon. It also allows us to track for the farmer kind of who redeemed those coupons for them. If there's problems or issues or whatever, we very much want the farmer to not just hand out the coupons as quick as they can, right? If there's a limited number, we'll say 20, and each person can get 4 legally. Don't just give 4 to every person that comes and knocks on your door. We kind of use the term like earn a coupon. Give somebody a coupon and tell them if they harvest a deer for you, come back and get another one. I have more. If somebody has historically been good for you and has harvested for you, maybe give them more. We very much want the farmers to manage those coupons, so that they can get the highest effective harvest that they can for the property. It's a good question.
Now, I have one lesson, and my apologies for harping on this one program, but it's one that we hear a lot about. So I want to make sure we get all the specifics here. One of my questions is when it comes to harvesting and keeping these deers, are there specific rules in play?
Nope, it would be the same as the regular DMAP in season.
Okay.
Because you're a licensed hunter, you received a coupon from the farmer, you purchased that tag, you're hunting within the ag tag seasons, we'll call them, the February to April, and then, July, August time. You can keep those deer, and you can feed your family with them. Certainly, if you want to, donate them to the food system, that's always appreciated as well, but the same rules apply.
Well, let's move on to number 4 then.
Yep. So number 4 is kind of the one where we get away from the hunting component of it. And really, it's a statutory rule that allows persons who meet the definition of person in Title 18, which is the law that governs, game and wildlife. They meet the definition of person. We'll use the term farmer for these purposes, and really it comes down to somebody who has a primary means of gaining a livelihood for general or specialized crop purposes. This isn't the person who has a garden in the backyard. This is somebody who's a legit farmer who makes a living from the property and the crops. It essentially removes the restrictions from harvesting or killing these animals, outside of the hunting season. So it creates an exception in the law for a farmer to go out and shoot for what we generally call, crop shooting or crop damage shooting. And it removes a lot of the potential laws and hurdles. You don't require to wear orange. You can shoot from a vehicle. You can shoot with a light. Safety zones don't apply. You got to make sure you're not on a township road, but it's not hunting. It's removing wildlife from your property. In order to be approved for crop shooting, certainly a warden's going to have to meet you. And this goes back to what we talked about earlier, Justin, right? You having that communication and having that relationship with your warden certainly makes this process under number 4 much smoother. You know each other, where each other, how each other thinks. You've talked about the issues. It can certainly expedite the approval process, but it looks simply like, and stop me if you guys want to interject here, but it looks like farmer essentially goes out 365 days a year, 7 days a week, any hour of the day or night, and can shoot deer with a rifle. And this is kind of, to your point, Ryan, where things change a little bit. A farmer that's shooting deer for crop damage is allowed to retain one animal in his household for consumption. Anything above and beyond that have to be turned into the commission within 24 hours. And really that's so that we can get those animals that are still edible into the food system, which again helps build support for these programs. We want the other rest of the community to understand why the farmer needs to do this, and that they're doing a good thing by getting this food into the system where people who are less fortunate could really use it. So part of that is a requirement or a law that the animal be field dressed and put in a place of safekeeping. We're not expecting them to go get a cooler. Although I've had farmers go buy bags of ice to keep deer cold, that's appreciated but not necessary. And really, it's just to try to keep the food quality there, so we can use it. We can't leave them out in the sun. They can't be left in the field. They got to be somewhere where the warden can come once they're reported, pick them up and get them as quickly into the food system as possible. So that's in general terms, what we consider to be killing game or wildlife to protect your property.
So usual, my retort questions for this, right? So if a farmer goes out, how many can they, harvest within an evening and report at one time? Is there there has to be a number to that, right?
Oh, good question. As many as they want, because again, this is not, when we get into crop shooting, we got to remove the whole hunting mindset that we're all kind of stuck in, especially with some of the other programs, the first 3 we mentioned. This is not hunting at all. This is the farmer or somebody who meets the definition of person, an employee, a son, a spouse, whatever, meets that definition, can shoot as many as they want or need or can safely handle. So again, as long as they're able to field dress the animal and get it to a place of safekeeping and get it reported within 24 hours, there's no number.
Within this system with calling a warden to get this picked up, what are the stipulations of that, right? And we've kind of thrown this, we can use a light, we can do it 24 hours a day, but it has to be picked up or safe kept. I mean, if I'm out there at 10 o'clock at night, I shoot a half a dozen deer, I have them hanging in my building. Do I call at 10 o'clock at night and say, hey, they're here? So how does that kind of program work, or that process, if you could walk us through what that looks like?
Yeah, great question. I mean, obviously we're limited in resources too. We only have so many wardens, but yes, our dispatch center is open 24/7, and you can call any hour of the day or the night and indicate, who you are and that you've harvested. If you've had that communication, which you should have to get approval from your warden ahead of time, most of the time you've talked about this process. the warden's going to know where you put the deer, every time you do this, and it's going to be pretty smooth. Sometimes, just with staffing issues, we run into problems where, we struggle to get somebody out there, but the agency has made changes to make sure somebody's always available to deal with this. Certainly when it's hot out, time is kind of the essence. So we've had folks that have chosen to wait until it's colder to do it. I had a pretty good rapport with my farmers as a field officer, and they weren't required to by law, but I asked them, hey, when you're going to go out and shoot, can you call in before you go and give the dispatch center a heads up? And what I would then do is start to make some phone calls to see where I could put deer. And to me, that was just working together. They weren't required to do it, but certainly it helped me to make sure that I got the most use out of the deer that were then harvested under the program.
And I think that's a question I have, but I want to save it to the end. Is this Pennsylvania Food Supply and Donation and how robust that actually is and how that looks? But I think we'll save that one till the end because that could be maybe a bigger question. But I appreciate that you bring that up.
Sure.
So, number 5.
Yep. Yeah, so this one kind of is the one that I think the least amount of the farming community was aware of, but it's certainly growing in popularity. The folks that have used this already have used it with great success, but we call it the agricultural damage depredation permit, or for generic, we call it the second shooter's permit. What this does, and one of the biggest complaints that we hear is, as a farmer, I don't have time to go out and do this. I don't have time to go shoot deer for crop damage. This program allows the farmer to get a permit to add up to 2 shooters, to go and act basically as him. And these are people who wouldn't normally meet the definition of a person, to be allowed to do the crop shooting activity. So, in our scenario, say I was the farmer, I could put Justin and Ryan on my permit, and then you guys would be legally allowed to go out and shoot crop damage under the rules we just discussed, on my properties as well. So it's one thing that we've done to try to help mitigate the workload on the farmer under the circumstances. So it's pretty easy. You reach out, you're talking to your warden, you indicate, hey, I'd kind of like to get the second shooter's permit. Your warden obviously is looking at making sure you have damage. You identify who you would like these persons to be. We will vet them. We want to make sure they're, generally law-abiding people. And really, it's your job then to kind of teach them and show them where you're having issues and what you want done with them. And they turn the deer in. We've had wardens who have worked out a system with a local butcher shop where the second shooter permittee can actually go and take the deer right there, and then the warden will show up and do the proper tagging and permitting. So, it's a really, it's a good program, especially for those that just are struggling with the time, that have trusted people that will actually come out and do this for them.
Just for clarification, can you tell us who applies for the crop shooting permit? Like, I know we've talked about the farmer, but it's not just the farmer. I think you mentioned like employees or maybe direct relatives. That was
Yeah. So under
this
number
would
4,
be the people that aren't on that list. So can you tell us who this would be that this would cover for? Does that make
yeah.
sense?
So under number 4, the crop killing, anybody who meets the definition of person would not need a permit to go out and do that activity. They've already met the exception. Or met the definition, excuse me. This permit is for a farmer who maybe their kids, and I spoke to a gentleman here in Armstrong County not too long ago. His kids are grown. They're out of the house. He lost his help. So this allows him to bring in other people who don't necessarily meet that definition to help him. So it could be a friend, it could be a neighbor, it could be, another farmer. It could be, essentially anybody who you trust that's properly licensed to hunt, to come in and act on your behalf. That answer your question?
Yeah, so within the crop killing, I mean that's kind of the farmer, the wife, the people that are directly affected, employees of that farm, are also able to do that because they're within that farmer who determines to make a living off of that operation.
Correct.
That's what has to be proven to be in that. If you are this person that is not making a living off that operation, that's when you would fall into this second shooters category.
No, not exactly. So you would still need to the farmer, the permittee who's applying for the second shooter's permit would still have to be somebody who met the definition of person because they make a living from farming. They just don't have enough help to help them shoot for crop damage. It's allowing somebody who's outside of that household, that employee, that W-2 salaried person, whatever, to also essentially meet the definition of person. But the permittee, the farmer who applies for it, would still have to meet that definition.
Yeah, great. I think with all of this, like kind of laced through this is like establish that relationship with your warden, because there are, I mean, we walked through five different programs that maybe for any given farmer might be utilizing one more than the other, and finding the program that's kind of right for you and your situation. It really helps to work through this with your game warden. And so I kind of wanted to, one of the things we talked about, especially in that last one, is that um, there are programs in Pennsylvania where if you're not filling your freezer with that one deer, right, we have all these other extra deer that are being killed, and they do go towards feeding people. So maybe you could highlight how that happens and what programs you guys are involved with.
Sure, yeah. Let me do that. Let me touch on one point that you mentioned here that
Sure.
kind of sparked my memory. We talk about these five different programs, and one of the things that I often hear in these meetings, usually after the meeting, we're standing around talking with the farming community, is that program doesn't cut it, or that program doesn't cut it. And I think that we all can agree, and it's important to mention, one particular program standalone may not and likely won't solve the issue. Cumulatively, if the farmer can engage in as many of those five different programs we mentioned as possible, that's where they're going to start to see some of the greatest benefits from the programs. Not one program alone, just it usually doesn't solve the problem. So I wanted to touch on that. But as far as getting the deer and the wildlife into the food system, the big program out there is Hunter Sharing the Harvest. They've been around for a long time. They cooperate with a lot of local processors, and there's money that they pay the processor for taking care of the animal, grinding it up, and then safekeeping until it actually can get to the local food bank. I know the agency is starting to partner with them because really, part of this is limiting funds. We want to make sure we have as many processors as possible. That helps the community. It helps the food bank. It helps the wardens have more places to get these deer taken to, and certainly makes everybody, I think, generally feel better about killing a lot of deer. That we all like deer, but well, I should say that maybe some of us don't, but generally speaking, we want them. It's a great program, and certainly the wardens should know who in their area are participants of it, and they can certainly enlighten the farmers when they talk. There's other ways we do it. We will usually always keep a list of folks who've reached out that want a deer, at any point in the year, and this is kind of where we kind of watch when it's hot or when it's cold, making sure we get them something that's quality, that's properly taken care of. But we will give deer harvested under these programs direct to families in our communities that are in need. Um, I think there's some that may not participate in hunter sharing the harvest that essentially do the same thing, and they have a relationship with the county food bank that can get the deer into it. Now, it gets a little bit different when we get into some of the disease management areas, because we want to make sure that we're giving them deer that are healthy and they're in good shape. So it becomes a little more complicated, but we do everything in our power to get that food into the system, because it supports the community and it supports the farmer.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to just highlight, just because I think it's something that we can all agree on a good a net benefit, right? To both the people that on either side of this deer management spectrum. So I guess one thing that you mentioned kind of at the start of that is that, not one program will do it, right? So I just kind of want the one last final thought on this, just to clarify could you theoretically be enrolled in all 5 programs?
100%.
Okay.
That's what we would actually encourage. Certainly, there's some forethought that goes into that, applying for the programs, getting the coupons, handing them out, managing where they go, essentially crop shooting, getting a second shooter's permit. And one thing that's not really listed as a lethal option, is harassment. We all know that when you harass deer, you spook deer, they spend less time in your fields. So there's even that option where just being present and harassing deer, keeping those mouths out of the field for as long as possible, can certainly have some added benefits to lethal removal as well, where we're essentially creating a void for another deer to come in next year. But we would absolutely encourage a farmer who is suffering from loss to use them all, to different capacities, find out which works best for them. Maybe they like one or the other. Maybe they're hands off and they'd prefer to just have others come in and they don't want to crop shoot. And certainly, there's essentially three opportunities there as well. So yeah, to answer your question, absolutely use them all if you can.
Awesome. Well, I think we're it seems like we've learned a lot here today. It's been great to really work through some of these programs, and hopefully this is a really good resource for folks, because yeah, they can be complicated and each one has their nuances. So it's been great to hear from you those nuances, and really get the sense that you guys are here to work with us. So maybe you can, if there are any other final thoughts that you have, maybe something that you missed here, is there anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, just again, thank you guys for having us and creating this opportunity for us to do what we're asking the farmer to do. We want to communicate with them, and I always encourage, don't always take it from somebody else that may be familiar with something or not. Reach out to the commission and ask the question. Ask to speak to the warden. You can reach us at 1-833 PGC Hunt, and you can get a dispatcher, tell them who you are, tell them you'd like a call back from the warden, and really establish that relationship. And that's really where we all become successful.
Awesome.
Great.
I feel like a lot of these episodes end with establish a relationship with whoever it might be. So I think we sound like probably a broken record on this show, but I think in this world, it's really important to establish good local working relationships. So Justin, it looks like you had some last minute thing to say here.
Yeah, I was just gonna say we will make sure we get a link to the Game Commission's website and contact information in the show notes. So if anyone's interested or wants that phone number and stuff, it'll be easily accessed to folks that are watching and listening to this. So, Brian, we thank you so much. We appreciate this. Like Brian said, we learned a lot. I think these conversations are good. I think that it's really important that we continue to have them. And maybe if there's changes in the next year or 2 years or wherever down the road, maybe we get back together to just do an update sometime. But we're always happy to meet with you all and do whatever we can to help updating the farmers on what's going on. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us, and absolutely, let's do an update.
Well, for our listeners, thank you guys for sticking with us and learning all about deer damage in Pennsylvania and how to manage it. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you on another episode of the Agronomy Highlights podcast.